At 1400 hours, I became a hostage to a cardboard box. Let me explain how that happened. Because I've been station security chief for 12 cycles and nothing in my training prepared me for this level of absurdity. Nothing. So context. 3 weeks ago, the diplomatic corps, in their infinite wisdom, decided our station would host 5 predator cubs. From the Carnath species, political. Refugees, they said, humanitarian. Mission, they said, just keep them contained until we figure out placement. They said they failed to mention the cubs would be absolutely feral. I'm talking apex predator younglings. Quadrupedal covered in dark fur. Retractable claws that could shred hull. Plating, fangs designed to crack bone. And exactly zero interest in following station regulations. Each cub masked about 40 kg of pure aggressive energy. My security team had been managing them in converted cargo. Bay 6, we'd reinforced the walls, installed suppression fields, set up feeding schedules, standard containment protocols. The cubs hated every second of it. They destroyed 3 observation drones, shredded 2 sets of bedding materials, and discovered that coordinated screaming at 300 hours made the entire security rotation miserable. Officer Kreln had started developing a stress twitch. Dr. Tamara refused to enter the bay without 3 armed escorts and a sedative ready. The cubs weren't evil, they were bored. Dangerously, destructively bored. Which brings me to Harper. The human arrived on the morning supply shuttle. Contract paperwork in hand, looking completely unprepared for station life. She wore civilian clothes, colorful and impractical. Her hair was pulled back in some kind of decorative arrangement. She carried a bag covered in floral patterns. Wedding planner. Her documentation read, temporary contractor for cultural exchange ceremony organization. I'd approved the hiring myself. The diplomatic corps wanted to host this massive event celebrating the new treaty with the Zinthari collective. Someone needed to coordinate the chaos. Apparently, humans had professionals specifically trained for that, made sense at the time. Harper showed up at security processing, looking cheerful, actually cheerful. Nobody looks cheerful at security processing. Hi, she said, extending her hand in that bizarre human greeting gesture. I'm Harper, looking forward to working with you all. Krelnek processed her credentials while I reviewed the ceremony requirements. Seating for 300 delegates. Dietary restrictions for 14 species. Cultural sensitivity protocols. Entertainment that wouldn't accidentally offend anyone. This seems manageable, Harper said. Scanning the files, manageable. The word should have been my first warning. She spent the morning touring the venue. Spaces, taking measurements, making notes on a handheld device. Professional, organized, completely unremarkable. Then she asked about the screaming. What screaming? I said, right on cue. A chorus of angry roars echoed through the corridor. The cubs demanding attention, bored out of their minds, making everyone shift. Miserable, that screaming, Harper said. Predator cubs, I explained. Refugees, temporary housing situation. Nothing to concern yourself with. She got this look, this thoughtful, evaluating look that I now recognize as deeply dangerous. How long have they been here? 3 weeks in the cargo bay. Modified cargo bay, reinforced, very secure. What do they do all day? I blinked at her. Due for enrichment. Activities stimulation. They're fed on schedule climate. Controlled environment medical. Monitoring. Harper's expression shifted into something I couldn't quite read, not judgment exactly, more like concern. Can I see them? Every instinct screamed. No. Humans were fragile, the cubs were dangerous. Liability nightmare waiting to happen, but Harper had this calm certainty about her, and honestly I was curious about how a human would react to 5 apex predator younglings. Brief observation only, I said. From outside the containment field, we walked to Cargo Bay 6. The cubs were in their usual state of aggressive restlessness, pacing the perimeter, gnawing on the reinforced walls. One was trying to climb the suppression field generator, despite the uncomfortable feedback. How old are they? Harper asked. Equivalent to human, 4 to 6 years, according to Dr. Tamara's assessment. Harper watched them for a long moment. The cubs noticed her, stopped there, pacing, stared at this new small, strange creature with the focused intensity of predators evaluating prey. They're just kids, Harper said. Quietly, they're dangerous predators. They're bored kids who don't understand why they're locked in an empty room. I started to explain containment protocols. Harper wasn't listening. She was studying the bay itself, bare walls, feeding station, sleep platforms. Nothing else. Do you have any empty shipping containers? She asked. What boxes? Cardboard boxes, shipping materials. I stared at her. Why would you want boxes? For the cubs, my brain tried to process. This logic failed completely. The dangerous predator cubs, I said slowly, need boxes. Yes, cardboard boxes. If you have them, I should have said no. I should have explained that introducing random materials into a containment zone violated approximately 30 regulations. I should have escorted Harper back to her actual job. Instead, I heard myself say, shipping Bay 2 has recyclable containers. 5 minutes later, Harper was carrying a flattened cardboard box toward Cargo Bay 6, standard shipping container, maybe 1.5 meters square, printed with handling instructions and safety warnings. You're not entering the containment area, I said. I'll just slide it through the material port. The cubs will destroy it in seconds. Harper smiled. Probably. She opened the small material transfer port normally used for delivering food. The cubs noticed immediately. 5 sets of predator eyes locked onto the movement. Harper slid the flattened box through. It landed on the bay floor with a soft cardboard sound. The cubs went absolutely still. Then they moved. Not aggressive, curious, cautious. They approached the box like it might explode. The smallest cub, dark fur with lighter patches, reached out one paw, touched the cardboard, jumped back. Nothing happened. Another cub, larger and more confident, pounced on the box. It crinkled. The cub froze, startled by the sound. Then something remarkable occurred. The cubs started playing, not fighting, not destroying, playing. They pushed the box back and forth, climbed on top of it. One figured out you could tear the cardboard and immediately set to work creating pieces. Another discovered you could crawl under it. Within 3 minutes, the screaming had stopped. Within 5, the cubs were completely absorbed in this new object, making sounds I'd never heard before. Chirps, chattering noises, almost like laughter. Harper said, that's working better than I expected. I couldn't speak. I was watching 5 apex predator Younglings behave like actual children. Instead of contained threats. I should get back to ceremony planning. Harper said, let me know if they need more boxes. She walked away, leaving me staring at the cubs, who were now attempting to stack cardboard pieces into some kind of structure. That should have been the end of it. Strange human moment, interesting behavioral observation. Return to normal protocols, except they cubs didn't stop. Over the next 2 hours they transformed that single box into an elaborate construction. They tore it into pieces, arranged the pieces, created walls and tunnels. They worked together, communicating in ways Dr. Tamara had never documented. They built a fort, an actual fort with entrance and defensive positions and what appeared to be designated rooms. Krillnock came to find me. Commander, you need to see this. I was already watching through the observation feed. The cubs had expanded their construction. They'd somehow convinced the automated feeding system to dispense extra water, which they used to soften cardboard pieces for better manipulation. Their engineering, Krillnock said. Cubs engineering. Get Dr. Tamara, the xenobiology specialist arrived within minutes, took one look at the observation feed, and stopped breathing. That's not possible, she whispered. And yet, Carneath cubs don't demonstrate cooperative construction behaviors until late adolescence. They certainly don't engage in imaginative play. Their neural development doesn't support that kind of abstract thinking. Tell them that. We watched the cubs add finishing touches to their fortress. The largest cub appeared to be directing. The others, the smallest, was decorating walls with scratch patterns. I need to document this, Dr. Tamara said, already pulling up recording equipment. That's when I made my mistake. I decided to do a routine containment inspection. Standard protocol. Every 6 hours, security chief does a visual walkthrough, confirms suppression fields, checks structural integrity. I'd done it 100 times. I entered through the main access, keeping proper distance from the cubs, data pad in hand. The cubs noticed but didn't react aggressively. They were too focused on their construction. I moved along the perimeter, checking field generators, making notes. I got too close to their fortress. The largest cub, the one who'd been directing construction, stepped in front of me, not aggressive positioning. The other cubs moved behind her into their structure. Easy, I said, hand near my stunner. Just routine inspection. The cub sat, looked directly at me, made a sound, then she walked over to a piece of cardboard they'd shaped into something like a barrier, picked it up in her jaws and placed it between me and their fortress. The message was clear. This is ours. You stay there. Commander. Karnak's voice crackled through my comm. Are you seeing this? I'm living it. I tried to move past the barrier. All 5 cubs immediately positioned themselves, blocking access. Not threatening, just preventing. Containment protocols require full bay access, I said, which was absurd because I was negotiating with cubs. The largest cub picked up another cardboard piece, brought it to me, dropped it at my feet. Then she walked back to her fortress, looked at me, and made an expectant sound. I think, Dr. Tamura said slowly through the comm, she wants you to stay in that spot. I'm the security chief. I don't take orders from cubs. I stepped forward. All 5 cubs moved to intercept. I stepped back. They returned to relax positions. Commander, Krelnok said, and I could hear him, trying not to laugh. I think you've been captured. That's not possible. You're standing in a designated area. They're preventing your movement. They've established territorial boundaries, sir. You're a prisoner. I looked at the cubs, they looked at me. The smallest one yawned, showing all her teeth, then curled up in what appeared to be a designated sleeping area of their fortress. Get Harper, I said, sir, the human. Harper, get her now. 6 minutes later, Harper appeared at the observation window, took one look at the situation, put her hand over her mouth. She was laughing, Commander Vexthal, she said through the calm voice, shaking with suppressed amusement. Are you being held hostage by children at a cardboard box? This is not funny. It's extremely funny. They won't let me leave my position. Harper studied the scene. The cubs noticed her at the window, the largest one approached the observation glass, made a friendly chirping sound. They like you, Harper said. That's adorable. Harper, focus. I need to exit this containment area. Have you tried asking them nicely? They're cubs. They're kids playing with a fort. You walked into their territory without permission. Now you need to negotiate. I stared at her. Negotiate. Or you could stay there. The ceremony isn't for another 3 weeks. You might get hungry though, Harper, she grinned. Okay, let me try something. She moved to the material port, opened it slightly. Hey, sweethearts, she called out. All 5 cubs turned, focused on her voice. That's the security commander. He's a friend. Can he come out of your fort? Now, the largest cub tilted her head. Considering. If you let him go, Harper continued. I'll bring more boxes tomorrow. Different sizes, colors maybe. The cubs looked at each other. Some kind of silent communication happened. Then the largest walked over to the cardboard barrier she'd placed, picked it up and moved it aside. The other cub sat down, waiting. You're clear, Commander, Harper said. I walked toward the exit, maintaining dignity, very aware that 5 predator cubs were watching my retreat. As I reached the door, the smallest cub made a sound almost like goodbye. I sealed the containment area behind me. Krelnok was grinning. Dr. Tamara was frantically making notes. Harper was still at the observation window. They negotiated, Dr. Tamara whispered. They understood trade. They demonstrated delayed gratification. They accepted terms. All from a cardboard box, Krelnok added. I looked at Harper. You're bringing them more boxes tomorrow. I promised. This is going to become complicated, isn't it? Harper watched the cubs return to their fortress, settling in for rest, looking more peaceful than they had in 3 weeks. Probably, she said, but they're not screaming anymore. She had a point. I filed my incident report that evening, described the containment breach as resolved, mentioned behavioral improvements in the cubs. I did not mention being taken prisoner by cardboard in 5 younglings. Some things don't need to be in official records. Harper showed up the next morning with 6 boxes. Not just any boxes, she'd somehow acquired containers in different sizes, colors, and shapes. One was cylindrical, another had a viewing window cut into it. She'd even found packing materials, bubble wrap, tissue paper, ready for delivery. She announced at Cargo Bay 6. I should have stopped this. Established boundaries, reminded everyone that these were dangerous Predators, not pets. Instead, I found myself helping her carry boxes to the material port. The cubs were waiting. They'd clearly been anticipating Harper's return. The moment they saw her, they rushed to the observation window, making excited, chirping sounds. "Good morning," Harper said like she was greeting students at a daycare. "I brought presents." She slid the first box through. Medium-sized bright blue shipping container. The cubs descended on it immediately, but this time they didn't just tear and play. They evaluated. The largest cub examined the box from multiple angles before carefully beginning to disassemble it. "They're planning," Dr. Tamura said from beside me. She'd arrived early, equipment in hand, determined to document everything. That's complex executive function. Harper delivered the remaining boxes one by one. The cubs sorted them by size, started integrating them into their existing fortress structure. Within an hour, they'd expanded their construction into something genuinely impressive. Multiple rooms, defensive positions, what appeared to be a watchtower. "I need to plan the ceremony," Harper said, "but I'll check on them this afternoon." She left. The cubs continued building. That's when Ambassador Quintal arrived. "Commander," he said, his tone carrying that diplomatic disapproval I'd learned to hate. "I've received concerning reports about the predator cubs. They're contained in calm, Ambassador. They've been given recreational materials without proper authorization. The materials have significantly improved their behavior. They're also developing unexpected cognitive patterns that weren't in the initial assessment." I followed his gaze to the observation feed. The cubs had finished their construction and were now engaged in what looked like role-playing. One cub was guarding the entrance, two were in the watchtower, the others were moving items between rooms. "They're playing," I said. "They're predators establishing territory and hierarchy through simulated combat scenarios with cardboard. The material is irrelevant, the behavior pattern is concerning." Quintal pulled up his data pad. "I'm implementing standard socialization protocols. The cubs need structured interaction with their own species behavioral norms. They seem to be developing perfectly functional social structures on their own, based on human developmental models that are completely inappropriate for their species." He wasn't wrong. That was the problem. Quintal ordered Krelnak to remove the boxes, return the bay to standard containment configuration, reestablish proper protocols. Sir, Krelnak said carefully, "The cubs might react badly to that. They're cubs. They'll adapt." I should have overridden him. Security was my jurisdiction, but Quintal had authority on refugee matters, and I'd learned not to fight diplomatic battles I couldn't win. Krelnak entered the containment area with two other security officers. Standard retrieval equipment, calm approach. The cubs noticed immediately. The largest stepped forward, positioned herself between the security team and the fortress. The others moved into defensive formation, not aggressive, protective. "Easy," Krelnak said. "We're just removing some items." He reached for the nearest box. Every cub started making noise, not roaring, something else. Distress calls, alarm sounds. They didn't attack. They surrounded their fortress, creating a living barrier. "Continue," Quintal ordered through the "Come." Krelnak picked up a box. The smallest cub made a sound that translated roughly to loss or grief in every species I'd ever encountered. The security team hesitated. They're just containers, Quintal said. Remove them. It took 15 minutes. The cubs never attacked, they just watched making those awful distress sounds as their construction was systematically dismantled and removed. When the bay was empty again, the cubs retreated to the far corner, huddled together, silent containment restored. Quintal said with satisfaction. Now they can focus on appropriate developmental behaviors. The cubs didn't move for 3 hours. They didn't eat, didn't play, just sat in that corner pressed together, staring at the empty space where their fortress had been. Dr. Tamara's monitoring equipment showed their stress hormones spiking, heart rates elevated, all the signs of trauma. This is wrong, she said quietly. It's protocol, Quintal replied. Harper found out at lunch, came directly to my office, and I'd never seen a human look that angry. You destroyed their fort. Ambassador's orders, containment protocols, their children, you took away the first thing that made them feel safe. In 3 weeks, their predators adapting to inappropriate developmental models. They're scared kids who finally had something of their own. She was right, I knew she was right. My hands are tied, Harper. She left without another word. The cubs' behavior deteriorated rapidly. By evening, they were back to aggressive patterns, destroying feeding equipment, testing the suppression fields. The smallest one wouldn't stop making distress sounds. Krennic's stress twitch returned. At 2200 hours, Harper appeared at Cargo Bay 6. She wasn't carrying boxes, she was carrying construction paper, markers, and tape. What are you doing? I asked. Fixing your mistake. Harper, the ambassador specifically ordered. Is the ambassador here right now? No. Then he won't know. She opened the material port, slid through several sheets of colored paper and a marker with the cap secured. The cubs noticed, approached cautiously, like they expected another betrayal. Harper sat down outside the observation window, made herself visible. I'm sorry they took your fort, she said through the calm voice, gentle. That wasn't fair, but you can build something new, something they can't take away as easily. The largest cub touched the paper with one paw. It crinkled differently than cardboard. Harper held up her own sheet of paper, drew a simple shape, held it up to the window. The cub tilted her head, considering, then she picked up the marker in her jaws carefully, like she understood it was delicate. She made a mark on the paper. That's beautiful, Harper said. Over the next hour, the cubs discovered art. They drew patterns, created designs. The smallest one figured out you could layer colors. Another discovered that folded paper created 3-dimensional shapes. They weren't building a fortress. They were creating something more abstract, more personal. By midnight, the bay walls were decorated with crude but undeniably intentional artwork. The cubs had taped their creations up like gallery displays. They'd even signed them, paw prints and marker at the bottom of each piece. Dr. Tamara recorded everything, her hands shaking. This is abstract representation, she whispered. They're expressing individual identity through symbolic media. Commander Carneith, adults don't develop this capacity until midlife. Some never do. Tell that to them. Harper stayed until the cubs settled for sleep, each one curled near their artwork. You're going to get in trouble for this. I said probably. Quint will find out, definitely. Was it worth it? She looked at the cubs. Peaceful now, surrounded by their colorful creations. Yes, Ambassador. Quintal discovered the artwork at Sir. 800 hours. His reaction was immediate and loud. This is completely unacceptable. The cubs are being exposed to inappropriate cognitive development, frameworks that contradict their species, natural behavioral progression. They're happy. I said they're confused. You're creating psychological conflicts. That will make proper socialization impossible. Or we're discovering that proper socialization looks different than we assumed. Quint's diplomatic composure cracked. Commander, I'm bringing in specialists. Real xenopsychology experts who understand predator species development. They'll establish appropriate therapeutic interventions. The cubs don't need therapy. They need enrichment. They need to be prepared for reintegration with their own kind, not taught to be human. He had a point, a terrible, logical, completely reasonable point. The specialists arrived 2 days later. 3 of them with advanced degrees and impressive credentials, and absolutely no idea what they were walking into. They assessed the cubs through observation feeds, ran cognitive tests, evaluated the artwork with scientific detachment. Their conclusion: the cubs had developed abnormal psychological patterns, inconsistent with species norms. Recommendation: immediate behavioral correction protocols. Harper attended the briefing, listened to their analysis, let them finish their presentation. Then she asked one question: are the cubs healthier now than when they arrived? The lead specialist, Dr. Ventic, checked his data. Their stress indicators have decreased, aggressive incidents have dropped by 90%, social bonding has increased, but these improvements are based on maladaptive. So they're better by human developmental standards, yes, by their own species standards. They're children who were traumatized and displaced. They found a way to cope. That doesn't hurt anyone. Why is that wrong? Dr. Ventic opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Because it's not how their species develops. Maybe, Harper said quietly. That's exactly why it works. The room went silent. Then the alarm sounded. One of the cubs, the largest, had somehow bypassed the suppression field, not through force, through problem solving. She'd observed the field generators, identified the power source, used torn paper and saliva to create a conductive bridge that temporarily disrupted the circuit. She wasn't escaping. She was standing at the containment door, paw raised, waiting. She's knocking, Krell said, stunned. She's actually knocking. Harper was already moving. Let me talk to her. Absolutely not, Quintal said. She's asking for communication. That sophisticated cognitive behavior your specialist said was impossible. The cub knocked again, patient, insistent. I made a command decision. Open the comm to two-way. Yes, Harper said. The cub made a sound. Complex vocalization. Then she turned, walked back to where the other cubs waited, and pointed at their artwork with one paw. She wants to show us something. Dr. Tamara breathed. The cubs had created a new piece, collaborative work. All 5 had contributed. It was a picture of Harper, crude, abstract, but unmistakably Harper. Her hair, her colorful clothes, her smile, and around the Harper figure, 5 smaller shapes. Cubs, they drew their family. Harper said, voice breaking slightly, "Doctor." Ventic stared at the image, at the cubs. At his data, this shouldn't be possible. He said, and yet I replied, "Dr. Ventic." Called in more specialists. Within 18 hours, Cargo Bay 6 had become the most observed location on the station. Xenopsychologists, behavioral scientists, cognitive development researchers. They arrived from 3 different sectors, bringing equipment, theories, and absolute certainty that they could explain what was happening. None of them could. The cubs had moved past artwork. They'd created a government. I'm not exaggerating. They'd actually established a functional social system with rules, roles, and what appeared to be democratic decision-making processes. The largest cub, who Harper had started calling captain despite my objections, had taken leadership position, but not through dominance, through consensus. I watched them hold what could only be described as a meeting. All 5 cubs gathered in a circle. Captain made a sound. Another cub responded. They went around the circle, each contributing. Then Captain made a gesture and they all touched pause in the center. They just voted, Dr. Timura said, her voice barely audible. They held a vote on whether to request more art supplies. That's not possible, Dr. Ventic said for the 100th time. Carneth don't develop collaborative governance structures. Their social organization is strictly hierarchical, established through combat dominance. These cubs have never engaged in combat dominance behaviors, Dr. Timura countered, not since the boxes arrived, because they're being conditioned away from their natural instincts, or because their natural instincts include flexibility. We never bothered to observe. The scientific debate escalated. More experts arrived. The observation room became crowded with specialists arguing about cognitive development theory while the cubs went about their business, completely unconcerned with academic controversy. Harper ignored all of it. She showed up twice daily with supplies, paper, markers, safe materials the cubs could manipulate. She'd sit outside the observation window and just talk to them. Not instructions, not training, just conversation. "How are you doing today, Captain? That's a beautiful drawing. Oh, you made that for me? Thank you, sweetheart." The cubs responded. They'd bring their creations to show her. They'd make sounds that almost resembled language patterns. On day 4 of the specialist invasion, something remarkable happened. The smallest cub, the one who'd been most traumatized by the fort destruction, approached the observation window. She was carrying something carefully in her jaws, a paper flower, folded, shaped, colored with obvious care. She set it down directly in front of where Harper usually sat. Then she touched her paw to the glass. Harper pressed her hand against the glass from the other side. "It's perfect. I love it." The cub made a sound, clear, distinct, purposeful. "Did she just?" Krillneck started. "Yes, Dr. Timura said, checking her translation software." She said, "Friend." The cub just identified Harper as a friend using proto-language structure. The observation room erupted. "Impossible. Carneth cubs don't develop linguistic capability until adolescence. They don't develop it because they're never given tools or motivation to communicate beyond basic needs. You're anthropomorphizing natural predator behavior. I'm documenting unprecedented cognitive development." Ambassador Quintal finally intervened, called a formal meeting, Required. Attendance from all parties. We gathered. In conference room 3, specialists, security personnel, diplomatic staff. Harper sat in the back, looking tired. This situation has exceeded acceptable parameters. Quintal began. The Cubs have developed psychological dependencies. That will make species reintegration impossible. We need to implement corrective measures before permanent damage occurs. What kind of corrective measures? I asked, though I already knew. Isolation from human contact, structured behavioral modification, reintroduction to species appropriate, developmental protocols. You want to traumatize them again, Harper said quietly. I want to save them from a life of confusion and maladjustment. They're not confused, they're thriving. Dr. Ventic cleared his throat. Miss Harper, I understand your emotional investment, but you must recognize that you're imposing human developmental frameworks on a species with fundamentally different neurological architecture. Am I, or am I just giving them options their own species never considered? Their own species has survived for millennia using established developmental patterns. Survived, Harper said, not thrived. There's a difference. She stood, pulled up data on the central display, medical reports, behavioral assessments, cognitive testing results. 3 weeks ago, these cubs showed signs of severe psychological distress, elevated stress hormones, aggressive outbursts, inability to self-soothe, classic trauma responses. Now look at these readings. Their stress levels are normal. They demonstrate emotional regulation. They've developed social bonds based on cooperation instead of dominance. They're creating art. They're communicating. They're happy. Based on inappropriate species standards, Quintal said, based on any reasonable standard of well-being. The room descended into argument, scientific theories versus practical observation, protocol versus results. Everyone had opinions, everyone had data, nobody was listening to anyone else. That's when the alarm sounded again. Security breach, Cargo Bay 6. We ran, all of us specialists in security, together, expecting escape attempt or equipment failure. What we found was worse. The Cubs had organized a protest. They'd arranged their artwork into a barrier across the containment door. They'd created signs using paper and markers, crude but clear messages. Stay friend home. All 5 cubs sat in front of their barrier, paws linked together, making synchronized sounds. They were chanting. What in the name of? Quintal breathed. They learned this from station protest footage, Dr. Tamara said, checking her data pad with shaking hands. Last month's labor dispute, the Cubs accessed observation feeds and memorized the demonstration patterns. They're 4 years old, Krelnak whispered. They're 4 years old, Harper corrected, and they're telling you exactly what they need. Maybe someone should listen. Clear's throat. Captain, the largest cub, stood, walked to the observation glass, placed both front paws against it. She looked directly at Quintal, then she made a sound. Clear, unmistakable. No, the translation software confirmed it. Simple, negative, direct refusal. She just, Dr. Ventic couldn't finish the sentence. She just told the ambassador. No, I completed. A 4-year-old cub just engaged in political dissent using learned human rights demonstration tactics. The specialist stared. Quintal's diplomatic composure completely shattered. Harper walked to the glass, knelt down. To Captain's eye level, "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart, I promise." Captain made another sound, different tone, question. "Really promise?" Harper said. The cub turned to the others. Some kind of communication passed between them. Then, together they dismantled their protest barrier, carefully organized their signs, returned to their normal activities. But they'd made their point. "This changes everything," Dr. Tamara said. "They're not just learning human behaviors, they're adapting them, applying critical thinking, making informed choices about their own development. They're children playing pretend," Quintal argued, but his conviction was cracking. Children playing pretend don't organize coordinated political demonstrations with clear messaging and peaceful resolution tactics. Dr. Venti was reviewing all his data, his expression shifting from certainty to confusion to something like wonder. "What if," he said slowly, "we've been wrong about everything?" "Explain," Quintal demanded. "What if Carnith cubs aren't naturally violent and hierarchical? What if they've always had the capacity for empathy and creativity, but their culture never provided tools or permission to develop those traits?" "That's a significant claim. It's the only claim that fits the evidence." Silence fell over the observation room. Outside the glass, the cubs were drawing again, creating new art, working together. Captain looked up, made eye contact with Harper. The cub's expression was unmistakable. "Trust, we need to make a decision," I said. "Either we accept that these cubs are developing in unexpected but healthy ways, or we forcibly redirect them back to patterns that might be completely artificial." "The diplomatic ramifications," Quintal started. "The ethical ramifications," Harper interrupted, "are that 5 children are asking you not to hurt them. Everything else is secondary." She was right. I just had no idea how to explain that to the authorities, who were about to descend on my station, demanding answers. The authorities arrived in the form of High Council Representative Thex Mora and an entire diplomatic delegation. They wanted explanations. They wanted data. They wanted to know how 5 predator cubs had somehow become the most controversial political issue in 3 sectors. I gave them the truth. A human with cardboard boxes and genuine affection had accidentally revolutionized our entire understanding of Karn development. The Mora was not amused. "This is unprecedented," she said, reviewing files in my office while the delegation examined the cubs. "These younglings were supposed to receive standard care until placement with an appropriate Carnith family. Instead, they've been, what's the human term? Adopted. Enriched," I corrected. Harper provided developmental enrichment. Harper provided species inappropriate conditioning that has rendered these cubs unsuitable for reintegration. Or Harper discovered capabilities their species never knew existed. Theaksmore's expression suggested I was being deliberately difficult, which, to be fair, I was. The delegation spent 3 days conducting assessments. They interviewed specialists, reviewed recordings, analyzed every piece of artwork the cubs had created. They observed meal times, play sessions, sleep patterns. The cubs tolerated all of it with remarkable patience. But they kept looking for Harper, who'd been asked to maintain distance during the official evaluation. On day 3, The smallest cub stopped eating. Dr. Tamara noticed first. She's refusing. Food won't engage with enrichment. Materials just sits by the observation window. Stress response, I asked. Grief response, she thinks Harper abandoned. Sorry. That broke protocol faster than any emergency could have. I found Harper in the ceremony planning office, surrounded by seating charts and dietary requirement lists, pretending to work while obviously miserable. The smallest cub thinks you left, I said. Harper's composure crumbled. They told me to stay away during evaluation. The evaluation is hurting her. What am I supposed to do? Be her friend? We went to Cargo Bay 6 together. The moment the smallest cub saw Harper, she made a sound that translated roughly to relief and joy in every language database we had. Harper pressed her hand to the glass. I'm here, sweetheart. I didn't leave. I wouldn't leave. The cub touched her paw to the glass. Started eating again immediately. Thexmora witnessed the entire interaction. Said nothing, but I saw her expression shift. The delegation delivered their findings that evening. Conference room 3, formal presentation. Everyone required to attend. The Mara stood at the head of the table, data pad in hand, looking like she'd aged several years in 3 days. Our evaluation has revealed a situation without precedent in xenopsychology. She began. These cubs have developed cognitive capabilities that contradict everything we understand about Carneth neural development. They demonstrate empathy, abstract reasoning, collaborative decisionum, and proto-linguistic communication, clears throat, all of which should be impossible at their developmental stage. Should be, Dr. Tamara emphasized. Yes, should be, which forces us to question whether our understanding of Carn development was ever accurate or simply reflected environmental limitations we mistook for biological constraints. The specialists erupted in discussion. The Mora let them argue for exactly 30 seconds before continuing. However, the central question remains. What do we do with these cubs? They cannot be placed with traditional Carn families. Their development has diverged too significantly. Forcing reintegration would be psychologically catastrophic. So what are you proposing? Quintal asked. We're proposing something radical. We allow Harper to continue her work. We establish this station as a developmental research site. We bring in other Carneth cubs and see if these results are replicable. The room went silent. You want to create a school, Harper said quietly. We want to create a paradigm shift. If these 5 cubs represent hidden potential in their entire species, we have an ethical obligation to explore that potential. And if it doesn't work with other cubs, then at minimum, we've provided 5 traumatized younglings with a safe, enriching environment. That alone justifies the experiment. I waited for objections, for protocol concerns or diplomatic complications. Ambassador Quintal spoke first. I support this proposal with conditions. Name them. Thexmora said. Harper receives formal training in xenopsychology. We establish oversight protocols. We document everything, and we give the cubs choice in their own development. Agreed. Commander Vexthal, your position. I looked at the observation feed. Cubs were building something new with their latest box delivery, working together, creating happy. I support it. Someone needs to rewrite the security Manual anyway, may as well make it. Comprehensive, the vote was unanimous. We spent the next 2 weeks establishing protocols. Harper attended intensive xenopsychology courses. Dr. Tim Ara designed developmental assessment frameworks. I coordinated security for what was about to become a very unusual educational facility. The Cubs sensed something was changing. Captain kept watching Harper with evaluating intelligence like she understood major decisions were being made. On implementation day, Theeks Mora addressed the Cubs directly through the comm system. You 5 have changed everything we thought we knew. You've shown us that growth isn't predetermined, that compassion and creativity aren't species-specific, that children, given the right environment, will exceed every limitation we place on them. The Cubs listened, their attention focused in ways that still amazed me. We're going to try something new. Harper is going to stay. She's going to work with you, and we're going to invite other Cubs to join you. You'll be teachers showing them what you've learned. Is that acceptable? Captain looked at the others, silent. Communication. Then she turned back to the comm and made a clear affirmative sound. I'll take that as yes, Mora said, smiling despite herself. The first new Cubs arrived a week later, 3 more Carneath younglings rescued from a different displacement situation. Scared, aggressive, traumatized. Our original 5 greeted them like diplomats. Captain led the newcomers on a tour, showed them the artwork, demonstrated the paper folding techniques, introduced each member of her group. The new Cubs were suspicious at first, then curious, then engaged. Within 2 days, they were participating in art projects. Within a week, they'd stopped showing aggressive behaviors. Within 2 weeks, they'd started contributing their own creative works. Harper coordinated all of it with competence that made her wedding planning skills suddenly make perfect. Zenza, managing chaos through organization and emotional intelligence, creating structure that felt like freedom. The xenopsychology community descended on us, researchers, theorists, skeptics, and believers. Everyone wanted to observe the impossible Cubs who'd learned to be more than their species supposedly allowed. Some claimed we were damaging them. Most admitted we were discovering something profound. I spent most of my time managing visitors and rewriting protocols. Krelnick's stress twitch finally disappeared. Dr. Tim Ara published 3 papers and had 4 more in review, and the Cubs, they thrived. 6 months later, we had 20 Cubs in the program, different species, different backgrounds, all learning together, creating art, developing communication skills, establishing their own social structures based on cooperation instead of dominance. Captain had become an actual leader, not through force but through example. The younger Cubs looked to her for guidance. She provided it with patience that shouldn't exist in a predator her age. Harper coordinated the cultural exchange ceremony in her spare time. It went perfectly. 300 delegates, 14 species, 0 incidents. Several delegates specifically requested tour of the Cubs facility. Word had spread about the small revolution happening in Cargo Bay 6. I gave tour myself, explained how 5 traumatized younglings and 1 human had accidentally created a new field of developmental xenopsychology. Most found it inspiring, some found it threatening, all found it undeniable. The ceremony ended with a formal presentation. The Cubs had created artwork specifically for the event. Collaborative pieces showing different species working together, playing together, learning together. The delegates were silent as the Cubs presented their work, then applause erupted, not polite, diplomatic. Acknowledgement, genuine, moved, sincere. Appreciation. Captain took a bow, the other Cubs followed her example. They'd learned that from Harper too. That evening, after the delegates departed and the station returned to normal operations, I found Harper in Cargo Bay 6. She was sitting on the floor outside the containment area, surrounded by sleeping Cubs who'd curled up as close to her as the barrier allowed. "You started a revolution," I said. "I gave some kids boxes and crayons. You changed how we understand intelligence, development, and potential." Harper looked at the Cubs, her expression soft. "I just listened when they told me what they needed." The smallest Cub stirred, made a sleepy sound. Harper hummed something soothing. In response, "The council wants to expand the program." I said, "More species, more Cubs, larger facility." "Will you be rewriting even more security protocols?" "Probably. Someone needs to establish guidelines for diplomatic negotiations with cardboard fortresses." Harper laughed quietly, careful not to wake the Cubs. I left her there, this human who'd accidentally become the most important developmental specialist in 3 sectors, sitting with her strain family of predator Cubs who'd learned that teeth and claws weren't the only way to change the world. Sometimes revolution arrives in shipping containers. Sometimes the most profound discoveries come from the simplest kindness. Sometimes a wedding planner and 5 scared children teach the entire galaxy that growth isn't about following predetermined paths. It's about having someone who believes you can become more than anyone expected. My security manual now includes 17 pages on enrichment protocols, acceptable art supplies, and proper procedures for when Cubs organize peaceful demonstrations. I'm oddly proud of